Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. So today, my guest is Ty Top. Hey Ty, what's up, man?
Hey, how's it going, Keith? Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. So, for those of you that do not know Ty, he has been an avid reefer since 2004. He spends his days collecting and propagating the choicest acros and is a huge advocate of aquaculture corals. His education in ocean and coastal resources at Texas A&M University at Galveston prepared him for the task of running a coral propagation business and helped him move forward with the creation of FarmerTyFrags.com, his website for selling pieces of his immense, I didn't write this, Ty wrote this, so this is awesome, his immense collection of corals with a large emphasis
like the verbiage
on,
I used.
I'm trying to emphasize, I'm trying to give it a little emphasis on some of these words here. So Ty is a scientist, a real estate agent, daddy daycare, and a self-proclaimed coral slinger. But before we start chatting with Ty about slinging coral, I want to thank the show's sponsors, Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. I really appreciate their support, and I also appreciate you folks that are tuning in. I see there's a lot of familiar faces out there, and I thank you for joining us. As per usual, please feel free to leave comments and questions in the chat. We have a lot of stuff to cover here with Ty. One last piece of housekeeping. For those of you that do not know, all episodes of Rappin with ReefBum are now available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. So catch replays on those platforms if you want to hear the audio portion. So, all right, wow, we got a lot of folks coming into the live stream, and all right. I see we've already got some questions there for you, Ty. But let's start off with a nice easy question there for you.
All right.
How the hell did you get started on all this reef keeping stuff here?
Good question, because a lot of people jump into freshwater or something first, and then get their toes wet, literally. And for me, I was like immediately just went to saltwater, and really it's funny because I actually studied marine biology first at A&M Galveston. Ended up switching over to the Ocean and Coastal Resources degree, which is more like environmental science. And what's really funny is I graduated and moved to California. Didn't think anything of it from there. Got an environmental job. And out of nowhere, one Christmas, my brother comes up and visits me in California. And he's carrying this giant box. I'm like, what you got there? And he's like, it's your Christmas present. I'm like, right on. So we get out and open up the box and we get back to the apartment. And it's a nano cube.
Oh, wow.
12-gallon nano cube.
How long ago was this?
This was 2004.
Wow.
He was the origin story right there. When he brought that thing from Texas, and he had to buy it in Texas and bring it up to California, surprise me and give me this present. And I was like, well, cool, so, banking off the knowledge I knew, I'm like, oh, this should be easy. And I'm going out there and I'm like getting salt and rock and all that stuff, put a little mushroom coral in there. But first week I put that thing in there, dead. so there's certain things I'm like, oh, the nitrite cycle and the ammonia and all that. So it's okay.
Right.
Yeah, all that stuff we learned and never applied. And so that's what started it all. So I kept that nanocube for the better part of, my entire time in California, which is 3 years, then moved to Austin and kept that for another, I don't know, probably 4 years on top of that. So
wow.
Kept this thing for 7 years in this nanocube. And it was hilarious because, finite small volumes, changes can happen rapidly.
Yeah.
So, temperature changes, alkalinity changes, whatever. Everything is just, accelerated because of the small volume. So to the T, every 2 weeks, it was exactly 15% water change. And if I missed one, boom, cyano, boom, something else, something always popped up. So that's where I guess it was like my practice tank where it kept me on the button on like, this is how you maintain it. And you have certain criteria and certain rules you had to stick by to make it stay that way. And so that kind of blew up to everything else. But that's the origin story right there, is that nanocube.
So how did you learn? How did you learn what to do and what not to do? Were you did you have any mentors, or were you just checking out forums and stuff like that?
I think I spent a lot of time on, nanoreef.com back in the day. And so forums was kind of a big thing for me. In Austin, at the time, I wasn't involved in the local community here for reefing. So I didn't even find them out until probably 3 or 4 years in Austin. But since then, they've been a great resource. But just, like everybody else, probably jump online, do a little reading. More so after the fact, like, oh my gosh, what is this I introduced? Or what's this purple algae on the ground? And you type it in and you're like, oh, geez. So kind of learning basically on the job training in a sense is the best way I can put it. You just kind of
learn by doing.
Exactly. So learn from your mistakes.
Yeah. We all learn from the mistakes. So you got some of your peeps in here, Ty. I see Peter Den's in here.
Oh, hey, Peter.
Who else? James Sparkman. What's up, Ty?
Oh, what's up, James?
Mark Fullenweider, a Ty, Coral Eye Candy Machine. So, but all right, man. So
my buddies coming in.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got some nice adult beverages right here, and I think we're up for a nice little conversation here, Ty. So, David Waters, thanks, man. Join the show. And
hey,
Ryan Reeves, happy Thursday, guys. Good to see you, Ty. Are you still on the?
Oh, Ryan.
Are you still on the new? He's asking, are you still on the no water changes philosophy?
Oh no! Hey, so I need to update everybody on that. So as things go and years go and methodologies go, I was a big. We haven't even chatted about this, Keith, but I was a big no water change guy.
Oh, you were? Were you doing like Triton or something?
No, actually, this is before Triton. This is before everything.
You just got lazy? Is that what was going on?
Yeah, kind of a little bit of that. Probably. Those were kind of my going out years. So I spent a lot of time going out more than I did taking care of my tank. But I would say that it was a large volume system. It's 215 gallons. So again, less stressors, less rapid changes. Yeah. The volume is just help alone. And so in that system, I just kind of monitored things. And this is before ICP testing or anything. So I could monitor the things that I could, basically. And so, a little iodine testing, a little potassium testing, besides your standard foundation elements of calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium. nitrates and phosphates. So I just kept an eye on those things and adjusted as I went. And 2 months between water changes turned into 4 months, turned into 6 months. And this isn't just a softy tank. It was like an aquapora tank. Yeah. So I was like, hey, maybe there's something to this. And so I did no water change on that system. I should say systematic water change. So I didn't do any, hey, I should change 15%.
Right.
I didn't. So I did that for 3 years on that system. The only times, skimmer, of course. Anytime I'm bagging up frags for people or whatever else like that, I had to treat the tank once. So I had to do a little water change after that. But as far as systematic periodic water changes, nothing for 3 years.
Interesting.
And did the same thing when I moved here and set up the tank. I did that for the better part of a year or two, actually, before I started. Well, let me look into this. Let's do some. There's a benefit, pros and cons to it. To me, a lot more labor intensive, salt mixing, pumping, water changes, buckets, yada yada. And but the thing was, I was like, I'm starting to collect so much in volume of corals and so much in, I hate to think of it that way, but cost, like just actual like amount of money in corals, that I'm like, hey, maybe I should look into this no water change a little bit more, because if something is starting to build up, there's no way to dilute it. Like if there's a rusty magnet, someone doing water changes would have a little more time because it's being diluted every water change. Me, 3 years of that, who knows,
Right.
And so I started systematically, to answer Ryan's question, I systematically switched to do water changes every 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
And I will say the biggest change that I noticed when I did it, and I'll credit my buddy Bubba Q. He's one of my best coral online buddies that we chat all the time about, but he had mentioned, he had got me on the idea of trying to do that. So I started doing that. And I will say my tenuous, all the other corals seem pretty much the same, but my tenuous spruced up a little bit. So there's something in that water change, some trace element I still haven't identified, but it helped the tenuous look a lot better, more colorful, and just more polypy, more vibrant overall.
Were you?
And so now I've stuck with it.
Were you doing? Were you adding traces when you were doing no water changes?
No, I actually
Really?
wasn't. That was the other question.
Wow.
I was doing nothing.
Wow.
So literally magnesium, now I was running a calcium reactor. So in the media alone, I was getting more than just your basic foundation elements. So, I was getting some potassium, magnesiums inside of that media, and whatever else, maybe some iodine. I'm not really sure, but strontium's in it too. So there's that breakdown of the actual media versus like two-part, where two-part is just straight, alk or calcium. So I think the calcium reactor was the big difference for me, excuse me, to be able to do that. I don't think I could have accomplished the same thing doing two-part.
Right.
If that makes sense.
What were your nitrates and phosphates? I mean, were those pretty much, were you using the and folks, we have, Ty was awesome. He put together this video of his current tanks and two systems. So we're gonna roll that in a couple of minutes. But I know from watching that video before the show that you use a refugium. Were you using a refugium at the time?
Well, no, and that's the other thing. I was heavy because at the time carbon dosing was kind of a big thing.
Oh, okay.
And so like people were vodka dosing.
Is that what you were doing?
And I started off with, what's that?
Excuse me, it caught me in the middle of a sip. I'm drinking Heady Topper, by the way. This stuff is like liquid gold. They're not a sponsor or anything, but if you're into IPAs, this is a Vermont beer that is a double IPA, and let me tell you, it is pretty freaking awesome. All right, I completely forgot what you asked me.
So I thought you were saying something. I was just gonna finish up with for the nutrients. So I was doing carbon dosing. Yeah. So it was vodka originally, and then after I got tired of squeezing that in every day, I switched to bio pellets, and I basically ran bio pellets the whole time for the 3 years.
Gotcha.
And so that was the basis of my water change system, was GFO for phosphates, bio pellets for nitrates.
Yeah.
And that's how I controlled my nutrient levels. And then everything else fell in line with the, two-part dosing to correct any ALK, calcium, magnesium. So.
Yep. All right, man. Let's let's run this. Let's roll the tape here of this video
All right.
that you put together. It's very well.
I was like, don't be too critical.
Very
I
well,
put it together
very
like
well produced.
last night.
No, I love it. All right, so let's roll this thing here. I think it's like what 2.5 minutes long or something like that.
Yeah, it isn't. It isn't too long.
All right, here we go.
Hi there. Just wanted to start with the display, since it's the backbone of the system. Obviously, you can tell I'm a big fan of angels. There's my Regal, one of my favorites, and also Bandit and Majestic. And somewhere in there's a Japanese oh, there it is, Swallowtail. The pyramid butterflies, I like the white on them, kind of gives it a different look in the tank, but they all do well with the acros, just a little nipping here and there, but nothing destructive, unlike my Emperor that used to chomp jaw-dropper frags. And then their dither fish for extra movement, like the Bimaculatus Anthias and the blue-eyed Cardinals. Seem to add nice movement to the tank as well. Well, here's the fish room. So here's my 4 tanks, as I consider my backup QT tanks. Everything I bring in goes through this system and is totally separate, run by an Alcatronic and also an Apex. And here you can see some of the bigger colonies got moved over here just to give me a little more space sometimes, but this is totally independent and separate from my main display. And it's 4 lowboy tanks with Radion lights and T5 hybrid. And these are the 2 frag tanks connected to my display. Again, I keep some of my more expensive colonies in those, and that's the back of my display. Here's my sump underneath my display. Pretty standard stuff: Refugium, giant skimmer, extra rock, and filter socks. Frag tank number 1, this is connected to my display. Kind of keeps some more of my high-end stuff in this tank. And frag tank number 2, connected to my display as well. This is where I keep some of the frags that I move on my website, as well as other colonies. Frag tank number 3, this is in the backup QT system, just where I store some extra colonies and backups. Frag tank number 4, again, just more colonies, a couple of pieces I brought in, Indo and Malaysian. Here's where I keep the torches and extra frags, and you can see there's a whole lot of extra frags. And then this is the final tank: softies, mushrooms.
That should be the wrap up right there.
And we're back.
All
Dude,
right.
that was very well produced. That music,
thank
music was just so like soothing. You know, gorgeous.
I had a selection of 12 audio samples to run that were royalty free, and that's the one I went with, Keith. So.
All right, good. So I'm not going to be getting a slap from YouTube in terms of a copyright.
No,
Good.
sir. No,
All right.
sir.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So, man, where do we begin? That beautiful display. In terms of the fish in that tank, Angel. So you talked about nipping and all that stuff. You and I have like some similar tastes in terms of fish. You know, I have the pyramid butterfly fish. I've got a regal angel fish. But I'm not as brave as you in terms of some of those other angels. The bandit angelfish. That thing is gorgeous.
And that there's a funny story to that bandit. There was actually someone that used to be like a fish website guy in Austin.
Oh, yeah.
Importer.
Right.
And he's gotten out of the business, but he brought in a little bandit for himself. And I went over there and I'm like, you ever get rid of that thing, let me know.
You got dibs on it.
So we lost touch a little bit. 2 years later, it goes to somebody else.
Oh, no.
And he shut down his system and it went to somebody else. I was like, the bandit. But I knew that other guy, and he's a good friend too. And I said the same thing when I went over his system. I'm like, you ever get rid of that bandit? I asked the first guy, but we lost touch. But I know you and I won't lose touch. If you ever get rid of that, let me know. So 4 years later, that thing ended up in my tank.
Cool. That is sweet.
Like, yes.
Yeah, no. So go ahead.
He's been awesome. He's been awesome. He lives up, he nips here and there, but then he stopped. And I think a lot of people, when they ask me about angels, and I'm not sure if you see the same thing, but over the years, because I've had these guys 4 years plus, I think they just realized, hey, I'm not getting anything from this. and the picking of the pops, and so they just stopped. So I rarely see them ever pick anymore. So
did you have those angelfish in when you had frags in the tank, or were they pretty much like put in with mature colonies?
Oh, so Yeah, because in the display itself, I don't really keep any frags since I have all these frag tanks to dump them in. So they've been mostly without frags.
Yeah.
Even new additions, or I'll grow it out to a certain size before it gets in there. So that might be a good point right there. Is that they never attack anything because I don't give them anything the size that they want to attack. So
yeah, I mean, I don't take too many risks with angelfish. I have the I love Japanese mass swallowtail angelfish, so
Yeah.
I've had those in prior tanks, and I have one in my 187 gallon display. And so those types of angelfish, I forget the the genus that they're in, but those types are fine. But for my peninsula tank, it's all frags right now, and I put in the Regal angelfish, and I was a little nervous about that because I was just kind of a little worried that it was gonna pick, and I think a large colony can certainly withstand a little picking, but if you have some small frags that are constantly getting nipped, then I don't know. So I put that Regal in, and it was fine for several weeks, and then for a couple of days, I was looking at him, and it was freaking picking at every.
Oh no, he turned on you.
He kind of turned on me, and but I started feeding him more. I started feeding the tank more, and that just kind of turned him around, and but he's also constantly.
Did that do it?
Yeah, he's also picking a lot at the rocks. So I like your.
Well, that's what I noticed.
Yeah, I like your theory too. Let's see what we got. Comment
the
was
Majestic?
Michael Howard, GBR South from Reef to Reef here. Ty, your system's looking really grown out now! Exclamation point! Beautiful exclamation point!
Oh, awesome! He's the one that razzes me the most on Reef to Reef, I feel.
Oh yeah, gives you a hard time.
Every time he jumps on there, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna give Ty some shit here." In fun, in jest. It's always hilarious, his comments.
So that's interesting. You pretty much don't put any frags in that display tank. I mean, that display tank looked awesome, and so you're growing out your acros in your frag tanks, and when you've got a colony, that's when you'll put it in the display tank.
Yeah,
interesting.
And that's that's a good question. To be honest, I'm not gonna lie to the SPS community here, but since I got in these frag tanks, I've hardly looked at that display. And so and it's a shame, but it's so much fun. The frag tanks are so interactive. You're just constantly looking down into them and messing with things and moving things. And I find 90% of my times with the frag tanks. So honestly, when things go into display is when they kind of outgrow it for me in the frag tank. I'm like, okay, this colony is getting too ridiculous to be in a frag tank anymore. And they'll pull and they'll go to the display. And so I know I have the little backdrop on me, but there's a tub in my fish room with me right now that's loaded with probably like 150 pounds of rock. And that was my goal, is to give my display a nice little facelift, because I feel so bad I've ignored it for so long. But I think even up to 2 months ago, there was a yellow scroll coral that I'd fragged a piece off, and the whole chunk, it was about this big, fell off to the side. And it sat there for probably, it's embarrassing to admit, but it probably sat there for 4 to 5 months just on its side. Because I was like, I didn't want to reach down to 28 inches to try to grab that thing and flip it back out again. So.
Well, I'll tell you, that's interesting that you say that, because one of my philosophies is keep the hands out of the tank. And a lot of the times, if there's something that I mean, obviously that was an extreme case where you had that coral tipping way over and needed to be repositioned, But even I always say to folks, keep your hands out of your tank, and don't go crazy in terms of trying to position things, or this thing's not in a great spot, it should be in a better spot, or this frag's not looking great, maybe I should pull it and put something else in there. If you give it time, then eventually things will let nature do its thing. Let nature do its thing.
There was I had a good friend here, Rory, and his wife had come over. And she, she's listening to us go back and forth. You know how it is with spouses and reef guys when they start talking, or reef people, I should say. And she was hearing us gripe a little bit. It's well, this happened. I moved this and I moved that, and this. And it's what? And out of nowhere, out of the blue, she's well, you guys just stop playing God with your tanks and just let them be. They'd be all right. And we're she's got a point, probably. She's probably got a point. But so it's funny. That's what you just made me think of that right there. It's just
I tell you,
your hands at it.
You touch a coral, you touch a frag that's trying to get going in a tank, and you're resetting it by weeks. And in my peninsula tank, I had this biofilm on it and some red turf algae and all that stuff, and I planted a whole bunch of frags back in June and July, and with super glue and epoxy, double barreled effort there in terms of just trying to like make sure those frags stuck. Yeah. But probably at least half of those fell off because they didn't have that good bond to the rock. And the fact that I had to go in there like every day practically to put frags back on and mount it, I was like, damn, man, this is not good because I'm just really resetting the whole process and I'm sticking my freaking hands in so many more times than I wanted to, and it was just not it was not a good feeling.
Just moving things. I mean, even just a slight adjustment from here to there is different par, different lighting, different flow. I mean, you basically changed their whole world, But
I would have to say, if you're going to be a lazy reefer, be a lazy reefer with that display tank in terms of corals and moving stuff around and placing. Just leave stuff alone. It'll work itself out. I mean, that's what I always say.
I'll take your advice on that, Keith.
Yeah.
Just leave it alone.
Well, it seems like you're already, you're 90% of your time with the frag tanks. It's amazing to me. I mean, I'm like the opposite. I'm like, always,
Oh, it's in your display?
Yeah. So, I forgot to ask you, how did you come up with the name Farmer Ty?
Oh, so when I joined the local club here, Austin Reef Club, and at the time I had a Jeep for 11 years of my life. I drove a Wrangler for 11 years, right? And so, anybody, you throw on your screen name together, you're like, oh, Jeeper and Ty. I'll be Jeeper Ty. And so I was like Jeeper Ty for forever.
Jeeper Ty?
And then I ended up selling it. And I didn't have a Jeep anymore. I had a RAV4. And I was like, well, RAV4 Ty doesn't have the same ring to it. So I threw it out there and I was like, hey, guys, I need a new name. Help me out, And they just, all these local buddies started slinging these names out. And because I was like, at the point, I wasn't fully into the propagation and growing and everything. Just eventually colonies got big enough and I needed to sell some frags out. It was getting too big. And so I was constantly cutting things. So I constantly had frags and they're like, oh, you're like a farmer, like a coral farmer. So like, hey, Farmer Ty. And so that literally stuck from there, which I do. And I understand the irony behind it. I'm not blind to it because like when someone sees the name Farmer Ty in Texas, I'm pretty sure they're not picturing me.
You're not the prototypical farmer in Texas.
Exactly. So I'm sure there's probably some shock every once in a while when people see Farmer Ty and they see my face. They're like, you're not the guy I imagine living in Texas.
So here's a comment. Here's a comment from a viewer, and I'm gonna have to say this is probably one of the more original screen names I've ever seen on YouTube. RJ Boom Boom Washington.
He's down in San Antonio.
All right. Yep. We need to see Ty in some suspenders and a straw hat.
Oh, that sounds like an RJ statement right there. You might get it one day, buddy. If I lose a bet with you, you might get it one day.
So let's talk about in terms of biological filtration right now.
Yeah.
So I thought I saw sand in the display tank. Was that sand?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm assuming your frag tanks are all bare bottom.
Yes, they are. Yeah, they're all just tiled, set up on that. Display's got about probably about 4 inches of sand. So I'm in that in-between zone of not being a deep sand bed and not being shallow. So I'm like in that zone where people probably don't want to be. You either want a deep sand bed or you want something that's a little more shallow.
Do you?
But it's worked well. I don't siphon it. I don't do anything with it. Just kind of let it work itself out. Mainly, I mitigate a lot of the nutrient issues that would come from it by being more aggressive on nutrient removal. So I know it could probably produce a lot of phosphate or nitrates from all that. And I try to be a little bit more aggressive, double size skimmer and running the Cato a little bit longer. I feel like, at the end of the day, with SPS, I feel like I'm a parameter manager.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a reef keeper.
Yeah.
I just manage parameters. So I'm like, okay, let's keep that outbreak there. And phosphates are nitrates, okay. And it's just kind of you play that line, and so that's what I do. I just anticipate, because that's when people ask, is like, well, how should I set up my system and this and that, and I'm like, listen to your system. If your system is telling you got 50 nitrates, then do something about it.
Yeah.
And if your phosphates are like bottoming out, then do something about it. Feed your tank a little bit more, be a little less aggressive with skimming or whatever it may be you use. So
what's your butter zone in terms of nitrates and phosphates? What levels do you like to keep them at?
I think we all did that same roller coaster ride. I'm gonna speak for everybody, but we all did that. Oh my gosh, nitrates, nutrients, no, and we all slammed it down to 0. and technology was so awesome at the time and advancing in the hobby that we could do it. And so everybody was like creeping at like 1 ppm nitrates and 0.01 phosphates, and we all got really pale corals, or at least for acros, we got really pale acros.
Yep.
And so I think as we're learning more as a community and people are sharing this, that I think, at least for me, 15-20 nitrates is where I like to hang around.
Interesting.
And phosphates, I'm not as tied up about it lately. You know, before I used to keep it at regimented 0.03, boom, 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 all the time. And as long as it stays under 0.1, I'm okay with that. So I haven't noticed any issues with it or anything else like that. I know every system is different. There's some people that have above 0.2, 0.3 phosphates with SPS, and their corals are beautiful.
Yeah.
That's not my system. If I get above 0.18, I see it. And I think that, and you might understand that too, Keith, when you have so much colonies, when you have so many different varieties of acros, you always assume as a reef keeper, they like all the same thing.
Yeah.
And they don't.
Yeah.
Some of them do like a little more nutrients. Some of them do like a little less nutrients. So at any point, I found the middle area that basically doesn't piss off any corals. I'm like, if I keep it at 20 nitrates and I keep it under 0.1, it doesn't take anybody off.
Yeah.
If I get above 0.18, well, the guys with tenuous are like, oh, above 0.18, my tenuous are glorious. I'm like, well, that's great for you, but my deep water just died over here, you know, or whatever it may be, you know?
Yeah.
And so I have so much variety, I have to keep this like midline to keep everybody happy. So
yeah, no, I mean, like you said, every system is different, every tank is different, and it's just a matter of kind of like finding that happy zone and trying to keep the majority of the corals, you know, thriving. So,
Right.
Insane Reefer, thanks for the reminder. Everybody out there, please hit that like button. We got, Ty, we're coming up on 70 concurrent viewers here, so we want more.
Yeah, keep it coming.
We want more, so the more...
Hope everyone's sitting there eating their dinner and watching this.
The more people that hit...
having a beer.
More people that hit that like button, the more people that will find this live stream and more will come in and watch. So, yeah, thanks for that reminder, Insane Reefer. Insane Reefer, tell me about it. I'm currently upping my phosphate because they are running at 0. My phosphates are pretty much close to 0 on both systems too. I just started doing.
Oh really? Yeah.
Well, I had been running an algae reactor in one system and a refugium with Cato in the other. But then I started doing bacteria dosing. So I've been calling this my experiment. I've been doing it since July. And you know, so
I'm curious about it actually.
Yeah, I've been dosing the Brite wells clean, and the and then back 4 or 5 weeks ago I started dosing the MB7, and so my nitrates in one system are about 2.5, and the other system they're about 5. I took the Cato offline, and my phosphates are pretty much like bottomed out, but my corals are looking great. So. You know, it's tough in terms of measuring phosphates with the phosphate test kits. There's just you know, I mean, you got to get so precise. And how accurate are these hobby grade test kits? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know, but
like we're dealing with part per billion. I mean, that's the thing that it's hard to have people realize. You're like parts per billion, guys, like billion, like tiny numbers. So
right, you know, so it's tough, but I know that I have phosphates because I've got a little cyano in one tank. I see some algae in another tank, and there's a little bryopsis in one frag tank and stuff like that. So it's not like, you know, my corals are pale and I'm getting RTN and all that sort of thing. So it's like you got to just visually look at your stuff and not totally lean on the numbers and get crazy with the numbers. What do you
I think that's what the experience like, Keith. I mean, you've been doing Reefs forever, way more than even me, and you know, you can see these visual signs just like I see probably, you know, like we're both staring at it and we're like, wait a minute, and without any test kit or anything, you're like, I better check my phosphates, you know, or I better check my, you know, nitrates. That's looking a little pale there. So and I think that's with new reefers, that's the thing that you don't get, you don't understand, you don't see that. And so we catch it before it gets to that break point when things start dying.
Right.
And that's the difference between seasoned and not. And it's just really, we've made more mistakes and we visually can see those mistakes before they happen. It's like, oh, I've seen this before. And so, you know, but yeah, it's interesting because I always wanted to I always thought it'd be cool if someone did like a little diagram of like, okay, what do your phosphates test at? 0? Do you have algae? Yes. Okay, that means your real number is not 0.
Right.
And then, so, you know, it's just kind of this little diagram to follow, like a logic diagram, and just like boom, 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 and kind of help new reefers follow that along. Maybe in my retirement or something when I got a little more time on it,
Well, the other
could do something like
the
that.
other thing that's going on is like you have a lot of corals, I have a lot of corals. The corals are sucking up a lot of nitrates and phosphates. You know,
Oh yeah,
you know, so
yeah.
that's a part
I
of the
remember Adam of Battle Corals is the one I mentioned.
yes.
I brought it up in a topic somewhere. I'm like, I never really thought about that because they are consumers of the nutrients too, as well.
Yeah.
So,
Now I see some folks in the chat talking about dosing phosphates. I'm dosing on my new tank. You know, my tank that just turned 1 year old. I'm dosing like over 20 mLs of phosphate per day. You know, on that tank, and
yeah.
you know, I don't have any algae in there. I mean, you know, there are little signs here and there or something like that, but
Yeah.
you know, everything is doing pretty darn
It's
well.
wild.
But it's the bacteria that I'm dosing, so
Yeah.
it's interesting. I mean, do you find that Chaeto can be problematic in terms of crashing every now and then, or do you not have that problem?
I haven't had that problem, but I've had. It's just so like from a guy coming from Reactors, biopellets, GFO. It's so messy, dirty to me. You know, like
Yeah, it is.
light spill is growing algae in other parts of the sump. It clogs up the little grates in the
Yes.
you know in the sump. And I'm constantly like every week, a week and a half, I'm like pulling, and it's just a messy endeavor in itself. But and I'll give credit to this because I'm sure Bubba Q is probably listening, my buddy, but. He's the one who got me started on the Chaeto because I've always been a GFO reactor type guy. And he's like, well, try the Chaeto out. I'm like, well, it is more of a natural alternative. So I tried it out. And he's like, oh, you're running the Bubba method now. He's like, you better credit me. And I was like, all right, I'll shout your name out while we're talking about it. But I will say, like, it's been nice to be able to ramp up and down just by changing the light cycle. So whenever I need nitrates are ramping, I'm crank up the light and just cook it back down basically and remove and take it out of the system with the Chaeto. So, but yeah, this is new. I would say in the last year, I haven't really done Chaeto up before this. So this is a new endeavor for me, but it's working out well. It's keeping my numbers pretty much flatlined the way I want it.
Well, that's
hovering about the same.
That's what matters, you know. I mean, that's the whole key. And if you're not like having issues with the Chaeto crashing and stuff, are you dosing anything to keep like any iron to keep the Chaeto going?
No iron, but I am giving it some nitrates. And which is weird because this is the same tank with all the fish that I used to have 50 ppm of nitrates. And I couldn't pull it down for nothing until I did the biopellets. But just nowadays, you know, the chemistry, whatever has changed in the system itself, where I don't have as many nitrates. And so I run the Chaeto for a little bit, but I actually have to dose nitrates to kind of keep it where I want it. So it's take away one and give the other and try to maintain that number that I want is basically where I'm at right now. So
I had a question for you, man, but I completely blanked out. So I'm going to.
No worries. We got time.
I told you before the show. I'm wearing like multiple hats here. I'm trying to be the. I'm the moderator. I'm the host, the producer, the tech guy, and sometimes I get thoughts that just kind of like jump into my head, and then they like just fly out of my head. But
you know, I was gonna bring up. Did you ever catch that video of that one acro that I posted and it spawned?
No. But
so
you got an acro that spawned, huh?
Yeah. So as strange as it is, so like one of my good buddies, John Sorkness, he's working with Mott's lab at the University of Texas here, helping them kind of they're coral researchers, specifically Millipora, and they're
love millies.
Wanting to. Oh yeah, I mean, millies are frustrating, and you know how it is. You love them and you hate them. It's just relationships of millies. But they're into the research on, and they needed spawn. They needed eggs. They needed gametes to do studies on. And so he was part of the project to kind of help them build a facility here in Austin to propagate and spawn. And so they were going to import some in and have them spawn. And this is all based on Jamie Cragg in the Horniman Museum in England. And so this is all based on his research, his paper that he put out, detailing everything he did, controlling light duration, controlling lunar cycles, controlling temperature, like average mean temperature in the tank. So he did these seasonal changes, and he can, like, to the day, almost to the hour, he said, he can make them spawn.
That's awesome.
And so that was the project that my buddy John was trying to do with Mott's lab. And I say all of this because he's one of my best buddies, and he lives right down the street. And so he's changing his system. I was like, maybe I should try that. never got around to it. Got 2 kids. I haven't any time to mess with it. And they're both young kids, I should say. But out of nowhere, out of the blue, I'm at, at night I turn back on my lights after the kids. We put them down to bed, and I do my, farmer tie work where I'm like fragging corals, getting orders together, corresponding with people who are ordering frags, and I just turn turn on back all the lights again. And I look over and one of the frag tanks, let's see how I numbered them. 1, 2, 3, frag tank number 4. So I'm over there in frag tank number 4, and I'm like, oh, there's something going on with that acro. It looks like it's bubbling. It looks like it's effervescing,
Wow.
And I'm like, what's going on? Interesting. So, like I walk over there and I'm like, and I see the little egg and sperm bundles are being released. And I'm like, oh
Wow.
my gosh. And I'm like flipping out. And luckily I had my camera in my hand because I was taking pictures for the website. Dunk that thing right in there and start taking pictures and recording. So I have this like live action. And I say this because every time you see coral spawning, it's either in the wild, and video quality, picture quality, even lighting. So you see a very, I don't know, it's almost like a Bigfoot video, very blurry, but you can see something's happening, right? And then you got it in the lab, which is they're based on propagation and trying to get them to spawn. They're not trying to color these corals. So like to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like the perfect scenario of a colored up acro in aquaculture environment that's spawning. And I was like snapping all the pictures I could. So I got this beautiful yellow acro spitting out eggs and sperm.
Wow.
Just and I got a video of it, so we'll connect and how to link it to everything so people can see it. But it was just dumb luck. I didn't do any of that stuff. Just one random one decided to spawn one night, so that was pretty cool.
Eric Alley saw that video, so it was super cool.
Oh yeah, hey, Eric.
So what happens if like you successfully spawn SPS in a tank? I mean, what potentially can happen? What? I mean, is any of that stuff going to take?
Well, with that one colony, no. So it's basically it can't obviously do it with itself. It can't like fertilize itself.
Right.
But if there was another of the same species, or even maybe in hybridization, there's always a chance too. But if we had multiple different millies, so that was the project that the Mott's lab was working on, was getting multiple different millies from a specific region like Indo or Malaysia or wherever, Solomon Islands, and oftentimes they'll get these things gravid, like they'll be ready close with eggs already.
Well,
bring it in, and then that way they don't have to be the ones that get it to that point. They just import it in right before the spawning season and let it spawn. And so there's this hybridization. So I would love to get on the inside track of that. I would love to give it a try. So my buddy John's gonna come over here and help me set up my moonlights, which are just golf balls with lights inside of them, and do all that and set up my season table in Apex. Excuse me, and give it a whirl and see. All I did was really collect the eggs and geek out for a little bit as a scientist.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
That's about it.
Yeah.
And then fed my fish after that. I'm like, these are basically unviable and unusable, and fed them my fish.
Speaking of fish, how important do you think fish poop is in terms of a coral food? Do you and that is going to lead into another question in terms of that I have in terms of, do you dose any like aminos or any other coral food, or do you like just lean on the old school of feed the fish heavily and let the fish poop kind of help feed the corals?
I'm in team camp fish poop right there. So I did try the aminos, like when everything was kind of coming out, I guess 5-6 years ago, and Acro Power and all these different Red Sea AB or whatever it was. And I tried them. I gave them a try. And at the end of the day, I'm like, well, basically it's amino acids and break down into nitrates, and basically you're feeding nitrates. So in essence, I can see as a system where if you're nitrate limited or nutrient limited, that it would be great. It'd be wonderful. With my systems, when I keep them around 15 to 20, I didn't see as much benefit.
Right.
And so I stopped. I gave it a try, just as any other reefer would. See if it improves anything. And to me, at least it didn't improve it enough that I felt the need to continue to do it. So I'm fish poop reliant. I mean, you see the amount of fish in that video. They poop all day long, and that gets distributed in my frag tanks, and the corals are happy, and that's what I stick with. And the main thing is just to export the hell out of it, so it doesn't become a nutrient issue. That's the big part of it. But I'm all fish poop, no aminos, no nothing like that. I will say I've always just been calcium reactors. I haven't really dosed anything or ever dosed anything, but lately, in the last month or so, I've realized. So I have I can't even pronounce the names of that.
Destaco, yeah, yeah, it's a high end.
Yeah. So I have one of those, and what I found was interesting was that their media is basically calcium carbonate. That's it. It's not. It's not like.
Oh, they have their own media.
Yeah, so they have their own media, which is very similar, I hear, to Triton.
Oh, okay.
Where it's just purely calcium carbonate. There's nothing else in it. And so you don't get any magnesium. You don't get any, like what we discussed before, with like Two Little Fishes Reborn. That's actually like dead acropora, basically, skeletons. So you're melting whatever was used to make the acro in the first place. So you get all these additional trace elements or whatever it is. And I started realizing that. I'm like, man, I've been running this media. I'm probably not getting a lot of trace that I used to. And so I've looked into, I think, this is not like a product shout out or anything, but I've tried Tropic Marinade. I'm not sure you can see that with the.
Yeah, it's kind of blipping out.
The A elements and the K elements, basically potassium and the was it ionic formulas, and basically just adds a bunch of these like little trace back in there. I feel like that might be something I was missing with just using the Triton media or the Destaco media. And so I've been trying to do that on this system. The other system, the backup system, actually uses Reborn media. So I haven't touched it, messed with it, and just left it be. So,
yeah, I use Reborn on one of my calcium reactors, but I also have this the Carib Sea, the large arm media, which I used to use many years ago, but apparently they changed the formula, and so now you need a much lower pH set point to melt it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'm not terribly happy with it. So I'm just kind of like trying to like get by with it on the new tank and then transition away from it.
Well, I heard the Reborn is coming back, or is already back.
Yeah.
You know, they went away, couldn't find them, and then they came back with this weird media that everyone was like, what
everybody
the hell
wasn't happy with it and all that stuff.
Yeah, and then they supposedly went back to the original. So so that's what I'm going to bank on, hopefully, from this point on.
Yes. So, folks, thank you so much for hitting the like button. We've got over 70, close to 75 people watching right now. We got 42 likes. If you're digging what you're watching, hit that like button, and more people will find us. You know, and again, if you have any questions for Ty, put them in the chat, and we'll throw them his way.
So far, they've been really softball questions. I don't think anybody.
Well, you know, I haven't
hit me with anything hard here. So.
I'm doing my best here, Ty, to keep track of the chat, but you're getting a lot of shout outs and accolades and what have you. But what else did we? All right, so the frag tanks. I've noticed that you don't have any egg crate in the frag tanks. You've got and I've done this before. I've had tiles on the bottom of my frag tanks, but I had an issue with detritus, you know, getting underneath those tiles. But I also had a lot of cleanup crew. I had a lot of snails and you know, a couple of fish. So there's a lot of poop that's getting put back into those frag tanks that's contributing to that detritus. What's your trick there in terms of not using egg crate? Do you have you used egg crate in the past, or you just find the tiles are easier for you?
I have used egg crate in the past, and it was just on one of the tanks, and it was just for me. I just didn't like that it seemed to trap the detritus into those little squares, and you know, I mean, anywhere in your system you can dig up a spot and probably find some detritus. So. It may be just a more mental thing for me, but I just like the ease of being able to just lift the tiles. So every one of these, you know, I try to keep everything in the same model, the same lighting, the same pumps, just to keep things standard so I can move corals and it wouldn't have an issue. And so every one of them is run with a gyre on one side of the tank. And so with that kind of gyre setup, actually all the detritus kind of piles in this one little line.
Oh, okay.
So between two tiles of 3-inch tiles, it usually just piles between those two. So, you know, I'd say like every 2 months, remove that row, suck it right out, lay them back in. So I'm not immune to the detritus. I don't keep a lot of fish in there because a lot of the nutrients are coming from the display system anyways. Yeah. So I don't feel like I need a lot of fish or cleanup crew in those, at least those particular systems. But yeah, that's pretty much my process, Keith, is just every 2 months, suck it out, and they all kind of line up in the same spots.
Yeah, I'm using you know, so I've got 3 frag tanks. One's got nothing in it right now, but the 2 frag tanks that are plumbed into my established system, I've got A-crate in there. And every week when I do water changes, I pull out one of the racks and I'll siphon underneath, you know, basically I'll siphon the whole bottom. And usually there's like a big pile of detritus in one spot of that tank. And in the other tank, the same thing. So it's easy to get to. But, you know, I find that just keeping on top of the detritus for me helps in terms of that nutrient control, because you don't want a detritus trap, and then that's just kind of like lead to algae issues. So
agreed.
Whenever you do encounter an algae issue, what are you kind of like the guy that you know, wants to snuff it out with chemicals, or are you more into the natural approach in terms of, you know, do a bigger water change, do siphoning, skim more? What's your philosophy there?
You know, it's it really, I mean, like any of us, it depends on our mood. Sometimes you're like, here's another battle with whatever, you know. And so me, like, you know, any major change when you have a mature system, like for me, I swap my sump out. I mean, I don't think people realize
you swap your
like
sump out.
Yeah, it's the heart of your system. I basically gave my system, a mature system, a heart transplant. So it's the best way I look at it. And so, you know, to me, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna pay for this in some way. And I did. Right after I did it, cyano like nobody's business, just the entire display. It's really interesting. The frag tanks didn't really get hit by it much.
Oh, really?
And I'm sure you noticed the same. But even though they're interconnected water-wise, each tank is its own.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Like
weird.
It's crazy. Like I'll have something going on in like one of the frag tanks, but nothing going on in the
completely isolated.
In the display tank that's connected to it. Not any sign of that issue. And the frag tank too. The same thing. Still quiet. Thank you.
Like I'll have dinos in one. Well, like one to just explode in dinos, but you won't find it anywhere else. It's so weird. And I'm sorry. What were we?
I wanted to give a shout out to Still Quiet for that super chat, and the comment is cool. All right, appreciate. James Sparkman, that sump was nasty. Was the comment by James?
He saw the pictures. Yes. He saw.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just remember what we were talking about. So the algae. So yes. So in that instance, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try the natural approach. I'm gonna let it be. I increased my Cato period, skimmed a little wetter, did my best to siphon when I could, and you know, it was kind of winning the battle, but it wasn't. And after 3 or 4 months, I'm like, okay, this one needs a little tip. And so chemiclean, boom, blow it up, watch my skimmer go nuts for 2 weeks after whatever, done. And I think to me, if I would have did it immediately, and this is the issue I've come across, where my system has not balanced itself out yet, that what will happen is something else will take its place. So if in the first month that it comes, if I do that first month, chemiclean, boom, I'm free. Dinos will roll in there.
That's why I don't like to use that stuff.
Yeah, and exactly. But and this has been reproduced twice for me, where I waited enough. I gave it 4 months, the system equalized. And so the only difference was that the cyano was a residual issue at that point. It wasn't the continued issue. It wasn't the continued problem. It was just what was left. And at that point is when I bombed it, and the system didn't react from there. It just, done, gone. Yeah. That's it. And so twice this has worked out for me, where when I did it too early, dinos. And you know, you and I know, dinos are a hell of a fight.
Yeah.
I'd rather reintroduce cyano.
Yeah, right. That's a walk in the park.
Yeah, I'm like, please give me cyano back, please. So.
Speaking of dinos, one of the questions here from Reggie Perryman: do you run UV on your system?
I do actually. I not in the backup, but I'm in the process of ordering one for the backup system. But for the main display, and I've been this way for I think the last 8 years. I've run a UV. Last one was, I think, 55 watt on 215 gallons. This now, total gallons is probably like 350-ish.
Yep.
I run 110 watt.
Oh, wow.
All day, 24/7. And mainly, a majority of that is for the fish. Because I keep a denser population, diseases can kind of spiral through very quickly.
Yeah.
So I keep it on for the fish. But obviously, there's other effects and bonuses, to me at least. So I always run a UV. So.
Yeah, me too. I just started running UV 24/7 both systems. I like the fact that it's also kind of a good preventative measure for dinos. You never
Right.
know, and I like the fact that it can help with fish disease and some you know,
Right.
some algae control. So I think it's I think there's a lot of pluses, and you know,
Right.
I did a have you ever heard of aquabiomics? It's a
Oh yeah, I did that.
you did that.
I
Me,
did
me
that.
too. Yeah, I actually
Yeah.
had Eli on the show, and we were talking about it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I finally got back my test results, and you
Yeah.
know, my I think in terms of the diversity of the bacteria, it was not. It was it was a lot lower than other tanks
Yeah.
they've tested because I'm using a UV.
Right.
You know, because I think, but everything in the tank is doing great. So obviously, it's not impacting it on a negative front. But yeah, go ahead.
And I also feel like on top of that, and maybe it's something that he discussed as well, but like with a mature system, you're gonna get more of a flat line of diversity.
Yeah.
There's not as much battles anymore because it's been a 5-year battle.
Right.
Something has probably won by then. So like to me, I'm like, and I think he explained it in his report as well. But he's like, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing that you have low variety. It
Right.
just means that's you know, and to me, like objectively looking at it, to me, I'm like, well, that makes complete sense because if people, you know, two nations are battling it out all, you know, eventually one nation's going to win, and
Right.
that's going to be what takes over. So
Right.
makes sense.
Yep. Another question from Nick: do you use ozone?
I don't. My buddy actually, John, that I mentioned down the street, he'll slam his system with ozone every once in a while. You know,
I've never done that.
mainly for bacterial stuff. I've never messed with it. I'm a little afraid of it, to be honest. You know, I don't want any to leak out into the system and be in my house or anything like that. So.
Insane Reefer, thank you very much for that super chat. Awesome conversation. Thanks, gentlemen, for your time and knowledge. We really appreciate that. We're
Awesome.
yeah. All right, dude. So quarantining. You've got a backup system, right?
Yep.
Frag tanks.
Yep.
What's your process in terms of quarantining? You know, obviously you've got a lot of acros in the system, and you know, there's a lot of pests out there, but acro-eating flatworms is probably the scariest of them all out there.
Yeah.
What's your process in terms of keeping those out?
You know, it's been interesting because I feel like the pest world has changed a lot for acros. You know, back in our day when we used to do it, acro-eating flatworms was a tank killer.
Yeah.
You got it, you're out. I mean,
Yeah.
you might as well shut the system down. And now there's so many ways to fight it, methodologies, Bayer, you know, just simple weekly Bayer dips and pulling them out works. So like to me lately, and this is from bringing stuff in, this is from getting it from other hobbyists and so on and so forth. But the big thing to me is bugs now, like black bugs, gray bugs, white bugs. And I say this, and a lot of people may not know what I'm talking about, but they look like little tiny copepods on the bottom of your acros. And that to me is the scourge right now. That to me is, I see that way more than I see anything else. So going back to my process, I use potassium chloride. It's my go-to. And I use, I don't even order, you know, I just go to Home Depot and I get this giant bag of water softener. There's two types, and the more expensive one is the potassium chloride. And I get those pellets and I crush them up and I mix it. And basically, I think there was a formula I used to use. I even posted on Reef to Reef somewhere, but Farmer Tide triple dip if you want to search it. But on there, it has my ratio that I use. And I mean, it literally kills everything. I mean, it's a little more harsh on the acro than Bayer.
It's harsher than Bayer.
Yeah, but and this is just a personal decision. But since, you know, I got 2 young kids in the house, I don't want to play with pesticides in the house anymore.
Yeah, that's smart.
And so, you know, I kind of moved over to potassium chloride. The beauty of it, it's a clear solution, so you can see things dying.
Huh.
You know, Bayer's kind of like milky, cloudy, and you hope that it's doing its thing, but you can't really see. I do that potassium chloride, and I can see things jumping off and dying, and you know.
So that's your dip.
So that's my go-to. It is a little rougher.
What's your what percentage do you lose in terms of acros that you dip in that solution?
It's hard to say if the dip is doing it or just the condition I receive them sometimes. But I mean, I wouldn't say I'd lose any more than like 5 to 10% on average. I don't lose too much as they come in, unless they were stressed in the first place.
And you think that's an effective dip versus, you know, against those bugs?
Well, I think it's effective to a certain point because to me, they're still surviving that dip.
Oh, they are.
And I tried Bayer on them, and to me, I felt like they survived Bayer too. So just throwing this out there is my little thing. Because I have a quarantine system, every, I would say 3 months, maybe even 6 months, I will blast that system with Interceptor, and that works. So Interceptor will knock them out. It will just, they're gone. And I do like a treatment. I do one treatment. I wait about a week and a half. I do another treatment, and I think standard dosing is a large dog pill for 400 gallons, and I will do 6 to 8 times that amount because that's the only thing that's found, at least anecdotally, amongst other reefers, that kills the black bugs. Those are the ones that can kill your colony in like a day or so.
Wow.
Very aggressive.
That's scary.
And so I've been doing that concentration of 6 to 8 times every 3 to 6 months. Costly, yes, but I mean, for the amount of money I bring in with frags, like, you know, if I purchase, you know, a splice for 1,200 an inch, hitting it with Interceptor for whatever amount that I do 6 to 8 times is plenty worth it at the end of the day, you know, not to bring that stuff in and affect my other acros. So yeah, so that's, as a whole, yeah, I'll keep it in there for a little while and I'll bomb them with Interceptor. And after that Interceptor bomb is when I'll move anything I need to the display tank at that point.
So do you have a you got a vet that's pretty cool and like, hey, dude, I need some pills here, and can you do me a solid? They're not. It's not easy to get.
I can't speak too much of that.
I had to like, you know, explain to my vet what I was doing once, like
right,
like, you know, and it was,
some are cool with it. Yeah.
He was cool with it, you know, but you know, if you need a constant
I will say
supply,
there are other countries that are a little more open to you ordering.
Oh, you have a you got an international connection there.
I will throw that out there. Maybe something down under, someplace around there might help you out with it. But
all right, I'm gonna get that. Send me a link.
But yeah, so I'm heavy on the Interceptor to cover bases for those pods, which I think are the menace right now. Because I've gotten so many frags from, like, I'm not gonna throw names out, but like known vendors or known garage vendors too, and I've seen it on them, and I'll let them know as a courtesy. I'm like, hey, I'm not like upset or anything, like just letting you know it's there if you want to take care of it in your system.
Do you have a so you have a microscope? I invested in a microscope, and yeah, you could see them.
The funny, and I'll get a lot of laughs for this, but I get terrible motion sickness, like terrible. So if I look into a microscope for more than like 30 seconds, I will get motion sick and it's awful, and I'll be wrecked the rest of the night. And that sounds awful coming from a scientist. I'm probably the worst scientist in the world. I can't stare in a microscope for more than 30 seconds. But visually, you can see these guys.
Oh, really?
There's a method. Yeah, I take it right to the bright light, and I hold it right under the brightest light, completely still water surface, and I just kind of lightly agitate that frag, and you'll see them run.
Really?
And that's the only time you pick them up. You pick up the motion and you're like, oh, there's something there. And so, at least for me, that's why I've been able to see, like, I've gotten, like, you know, occasionally I'll find like a reefer that has large colonies, and I'll buy large chunks from them and set up my own colony and sell frags on my website as well. And so, I collect from other reefers sometimes, and I bought a very large, couple of chunks from somebody, flip it over, and I'm like, oh my God, it's like littered with them.
Well, I'll tell you, that's interesting because I have, I got two separate systems, and I've got frag tanks attached to those two systems. And my quarantine system is a 20-gallon quarantine tank, but it sounds like it's a good idea to hit that quarantine tank up every couple of months with some Interceptor, because
I would, yeah.
What about?
I would.
And it sounds like
highly recommend it.
Yeah, it sounds like the Australian connection is the way to go, huh? For the Interceptor.
and cost wise, it wasn't really. It was about the same as buying it in the States, to be honest. So,
yeah.
You just have to wait a little longer. I will, and again, a plug for Dr. G's dip, but it has the same active ingredient as Interceptor in it. The Milbum, Oxium or whatever, I can't even pronounce it right now, but it has the same active ingredient, which is great because if you're dealing with Interceptor, you're crushing pills, and that's kind of hard for frags. If you send me a frag pack and I'm like, oh, awesome, I got a ReefBum frag pack, and then I got to dip them in Interceptor, well, and then I got to crush up a pill and dissolve it, pour it in. let it sit for 6 to 8 hours, because that it needs to be within it. It can't just be like a quick dip. It has to sit and reside in it. And so that's where the Dr. G's is great for like dips. So for me, Dr. G's, pour it in, do it to their recommendations. And that to me is the same thing as an interceptor dip at the end of the day. So
Trevor King says, "What's up, Ty?" And
hey, Trevor.
And Unorthodox Reef is in the house, as well as Wade Riles. Acro reading flatworms. Let's say you get some frags in, or you get some colonies in. If you're doing that, and you see some eggs on it, and you see some worms on it, what's your process for acro reading flatworms?
It depends on the frag. If it's a cheap frag,
gone.
I'm being honest. If it's anything like under 150, I just toss it. I'm not even messing with that. But I will say, my process, if I would find it, one, potassium chloride would be able to let me see, like they literally jump off. I mean, they're like burning from the outside in. And so I can see them jump off. And at that point, I can decide what I need to do with it. Easy thing for me, obviously, and plugs, get rid of plugs, no plugs, no plugs, no plugs, only acro flesh. I can't speak for LPS people or Zoas. I'm mainly an acro guy. So, but yeah, flesh only. Any part that even, if there's like a little tissue and then the little tip is dead or whatever, I will super glue that tip or cut it off. So I only bring in flesh, and anything else gets super glued or cut off. And then for the actual eggs themselves, super glue right over them.
Yep.
Scrape them off, whatever you need to do.
Right.
Again, I would only resort to that if it was like a $1,000 jaw dropper frag or something.
Right.
I wouldn't go through that for something cheap.
So you've been doing this for a while, Ty, in terms of frags and whatnot. Have you ever had a situation where in a frag tank where you've discovered you had acro eating flatworms, like a full tank thing, and you had to deal with like a whole full tank of eradication, or what was your?
So it was 2012. And that was when I was about a year and a half into acro keeping in the first place. So like most people, you're like, ooh, I can keep them alive now. I'm awesome. So you just start collecting the hell out of them. And then you realize, you missed a big important step of dipping in there or getting rid of plugs. And this was like back in the day before people really, I would say, it's like 10 years ago. People were really like so avid in dipping now. So it's kind of more the wild, wild west. And we're like, oh, cool. Thanks for the Oregon tort. And you throw it in there. And later on, you're like, where are all these bite marks? So that system, which is a no water change system, looking down, you can see all these bite marks. And I'm like, oh, and I looked it up. And I'm like, oh,
there you go.
Oh, jeez, what have I got myself into? And luckily, that was when Bayer was first being circulated and used. And people were like, oh, this is an awesome way to treat. And so I literally took a tub and plumbed it into my display, pulled every acro colony off the rock. I mean, this is like I wouldn't say a fully mature, but semi-mature system. So I'm pulling all these colonies off, and I'm like calking the base that was left. And my methodology was starve the display out and take anything acro flesh wise and move it to this tub that was connected. So I still had the same water stability of my system, but I removed it from the pest. And then from that point on, weekly dips in Bayer and put it back in the tub. And any eggs or anything like that, scrape over or super glue, cut off anything that wasn't live tissue, kind of the same process I do with frags. And so I did that for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And on the back end side of it, where the water went back from the tub in the display system, I had socks on there with like 50 micron socks so nothing can get back through. And then I also had a UV on it. So I was like, nothing is coming back through. Either going to get zapped by UV or get caught with this sock. And that did it. 8 weeks of that, boom, done. Put all my acros back in and never had to deal with acro eating flatworms again within a system. Now, a frag would occasionally show up with some, and again,
ditch it. And if
or treat,
so. No, it makes total sense. All right, dude. It's almost 7:30 my time. How much more time do we have? How much more time do you have with us?
I probably have another 15 minutes, and then I probably need to get rolling.
All right.
Kids got to go to bed.
What else have we? What about what are some of your favorite acros that you have in your systems? I mean, let's talk like specific in terms of some of your favorites and most
This is like asking someone to choose their favorite kids. I mean, I guess the kids can't listen and talk back. You can say all you want, I guess, but it won't hurt their feelings. I'm like anybody else. I get crushes, like acro crushes. So at certain times, something becomes more old news to me, even though it's just as beautiful. Jeez, they kind of put me on the spot.
I was looking at your IG there, man, and I saw the Rocky Mountain Frags Lucky Charms. I just got a frag of that a few weeks ago, and it's just starting to encrust now. But that looked pretty awesome. Taking off for you now, huh?
Oh, I love that thing, and that's a rescue. Like I had probably a mini colony of it, and then I can't even remember what issue it was. Came back from vacation, it was down to like encrustment. It was like literally like an inch of encrustment. So that colony you saw was brought back from like a year ago of just encrustment, which, you know, you take your victories and you take your laps with them, you know, with those. And that was one of my victory laps. I'm like, I'm taking this one. That was awesome to bring it back. But yeah, I you know, that one is gorgeous to me. Oh, my most current crush is the Reef Raft USA Angry Birds. That I got from TSA. Oh, it's just divine. Like the pops look like flames coming out of a blue body. It was just, it's insane. I'll give tons of shout out on that piece, and I will throw it out there for people listening. There is 2 versions. I'm not going to get into which version or whatever, but buy it from TSA. That is the real one that I have, at least, and that's the one with the flame pops, which is to me the better version. So that one I always had a crush on. Jaw Dropper, of course. I got a beautiful piece from Tim Herman, which is great because I lost my colony. And I told you this offline when we were talking about Thurman. He's kind of we bank a lot with each other. You know, you always, as an acro guy, you got to find a good bank.
Yeah.
You always got to put your good investments in a bank, and he's my bank. Bank up Thurman. And so I sent him a jaw dropper back the last time we traded. And then he grew this magnificent, beautiful colony that made me feel this big. Because I'm like, well, I didn't do that in 2 years, and you did that in a year and a half. You built this beautiful colony. So after I lost mine, he sent me back a chunk. Gorgeous. I fell back in love with this thing. It is just amazing, amazing. So those are 2 of my top lists. Hung's Rainbow, and that's another one that unfortunately paid with it with the sump swap. But so I got another piece from Tim, falling back in love with that one again.
We didn't even talk about lighting. I think you mentioned in the video you're using a combination of Radions and T5s.
Yeah, so I'm using the Aquatic Life kind of fixtures. So I got the Radions, the G4 Pros, running with T5 Blue Plus bulbs, 2 of them, and then 2 actinic blue bulbs as well. Excuse me. And that's I run like an 8-hour cycle with AB Plus. You know, nothing fancy with the Radions, and then I'll run 8 hours with the T5s with it, and then done and dust cycles blue on either side for about 2 hours. Nothing crazy, I would say. I think on average, people always ask me more so about the par, and I'm hitting most. I don't think anything gets under 275 in my system. So like everything's 75, 300 plus. Average is probably like 375s. Everything's get hit by. Tenuous probably 500-ish. You know, somewhere in that range. So.
All right, we got a couple more questions, and then you got to run, man. Hazlip Crystal. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Hey, Crystal. She's a logo.
All right. Hey, Ty. Always good to see you doing great things, but let's make the new kids feel good. What is your most embarrassing newbie mistake?
Oh, man. There's so many. There's so many years that span reefing. I've gotten so many embarrassing stories. I think the best one is my wife was witness to this one, so I would say it's extra embarrassing, but I was actually redoing some plumbing. I had to clear out some debris that got into one of my lines from my UV line. And it's I'm losing my terminology, but you know, when you have the drilled at the bottom, recirculating. And so, you know, it was dicey to do anyways, because once I open it, you know, water would come. So I plugged up the top, undid it, and I was gonna slam it, let all the debris come out, and dip it right back on there. And that was in my head. I was like, that's how it's gonna work out. And so I go in there and I'm like, start going, twisting. A little bit of water's coming down. I'm like, oh, good. All that sediment starts coming out. I'm like, oh, good. All the sediment's coming out. And I start trying to get it back on there and start twisting it. And then the water's starting to really rush because that little plug I got in there is not doing its job anymore. And then somehow it gets knocked off of there. So like full flow is starting to come. And I'm like, oh, SHIT. And I'm like, oh, let me get this on really fast. And I start twisting and twisting. So much debris came out that it got caught in the threading of that bulkhead or the union. and then it wouldn't let me seal it. So I had to unseal it again to get all that debris out of there. The whole time, 215 gallons of water pressure coming out the bottom is coming at me. And so at the same time, the water is leaking enough, it's splashing out of the sump and it gets near a plug. So at the same time, I'm trying to twist this on, I'm getting shocked by water in a plug somewhere that I can't identify. So I'm like, oh, ow, oh, ow. And I'm like screaming, and my wife's like, what can I do? What can I do? And I'm like, nothing,
Don't touch me.
Near this. And I'm like, I'm just trying to do this whole thing. I'm getting shocked this whole time. And I finally kicked the plug out of there and twisted on enough. And I'm like drenched. I probably got shocked at least 3 or 4 times by this plug. And the worst part is my wife was witness to all of that. So, I consider my fish room like Vegas. Whatever happens in here, stays in here. But she got to see that part of it. So I'm like, oh man, I had to live that shame.
Too bad we didn't get a video of that one.
I'm glad there's no proof of that. So, Crystal, that is my most embarrassing story, I would say.
A couple more quick questions. Michael Howard, question for Ty on fish. How do you think a blueface angel would go in your display, given your success with other angels with your existing corals?
It's funny you mentioned that, because that was one of those that I thought about. I thought about adding to my system, honestly. I had a scribbled before, and I kind of put the blueface in with kind of in between scribbled and emperor. Emperor being the worst scenario to put an angel into your acro tank, because that guy was chomping jaw dropper frags. He was eating like $1,000 every week, and I was like,
yeah, that's not going to work.
That's not going to work for me. But I would put the blueface just kind of below him, because what I've realized is with those particular type of angels, I guess Pomacanthus, or I can't remember what exactly they are, but they have these very beak-like structures on their mouths, and I mean they're gonna do what they're gonna do with those beak-like structures, and they can cause damage. So blueface in there where the risk zone, I may give it a try one day. The risk is there, and the other thing is, once you have an established fish population, adding another one gets kind of dicey, because these other angels may not accept it, or he, as much as I want to quarantine and everything, something might slip through, and I got 4, 5, 6-year-old fish that I don't want to endanger. So I'm kind of at that point where I'm like, I almost don't want to mess with my fish stock right now. It's a delicate balance. So
and then you got.
I love them. They're beautiful. Beautiful fish.
For sure. All right, dude, I'm going to let you go. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Well, I just want to thank everyone that joined in on the chat. Thank you and Keith for hosting. I appreciate you inviting me here, and this is a wonderful conversation. It's always fun. Like I said, I joked with you earlier when we were offline. I was like, I've never really let people see my face, or even really showed my personality on some videos, and so I've always just kept it behind the scenes, behind the cloak, and just narrated.
Now you're out there, man.
I'm out there. Oh my gosh. Hopefully it doesn't come back to bite me.
Everybody should go check out farmertyfrags.com. And
I do want to give a shout out to a couple of buddies that have helped me get up to this point. One I've already mentioned, my buddy John down the street, been my reefing buddy for life, and we've always supported each other and got each other's backs. Jake at River City Aquatics, local fish store here. Supplies me with everything, salt, everything, rocks, whatever I need. The beautiful fish population that I have, minus that bandit fish, was all him. Of course, my buddy Bubba Q, he's my sanity check every once in a while. I was like, should I do this? Should I add a denitrator? Should I do this? And we always bounce back and forth. And so just want to throw that out there. And of course, Tim Herman, my bank. So I appreciate it, guy. And Colin for reaching out to you and getting this all put together. I appreciate him advocating for me, and he's always been a good buddy. So
you got to take care of those reefing buddies. You gotta give credit where credit is due, because this is a hobby where you need friends.
Right.
And you need that support system. So I hear you, dude. James Sparkman calls you the Wizard of Acros.
Oh, thank you, James. I appreciate it, sir. You'll be invited back here soon once all of this dies down with the pandemic. But yes.
All right, dude. Well, listen, Ty, thank you so much for being a guest, and love to have you come back, because I probably have another 50 questions for you there, but I'm sure other folks do as well. But I would say reach out to Ty at farmertyfrags.com, or put a comment in the you know, in the comment for this video, and perhaps Ty will see it there. So anyway, that's going to wrap it for this show. And again, thanks to Ty for being a guest. I also want to thank Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine for sponsoring and supporting the show. And also want to thank you folks out there for tuning in and watching. Please spread the word. And also want to remind you that we do have Rappin With ReefBum episodes available as podcasts now. My next live stream is going to be on next Thursday, November 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Dr. Tim Hovinus. So for those of you that remember, I had him on, I don't know, a couple of months ago, and he was in LA, and all of a sudden the power just cut out in his office. So
that's no surprise in LA.
Yeah, so we had to like reschedule Tim, and he's going to be back next week. So it should be another great show. Come prepared with a lot of questions. Until then, be safe and be well, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Keith. This is so much fun.